Hey, it's Mike Fineman, and I am here from the Fatherhood Code with John Whitley at the BA second quarter event. And John and I got to talking earlier, and he shared some amazing information with me about his journey, and I haven't heard enough. And so we agreed to come together and do a brief podcast, and I can't wait to hear your story about your journey and how you maintained your relationship with your kids while building businesses.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So, John, you live in Australia currently?
I do. I live in Perth, Western Australia.
Yep. And how many children do you have?
I have 3 boys.
How old are they? What are their names?
I have twin boys, Daniel and Toby, that are 23, and I have a 20-year-old son called Evan.
That's great. How long have you been married?
28 years.
That's amazing.
It's a journey.
Yeah. What are the boys doing now?
I have one boy who's a carpenter's apprentice and has his own business, very entrepreneurial. I have one who's followed me in my initial footsteps and is working in a car yard, selling cars and doing very well. And my third is a nurse. He's at university doing nursing.
That's great. Did you start in the car business?
I did. I was a young man with very few qualifications and very few options, and I decided very early I liked money and I liked cars, and that was my chosen path. It was a really complicated path, you know.
That's fantastic. I'd love to hear about your journey a little bit, and where you started your path in marriage, and then when you started having children, and what that looked like.
Sure. I had a very entrepreneurial start. Probably had my first business when I was 21. That was in the UK, and it was a mortgage brokerage. I knew very little about it. I was the first franchise of a franchise. For a franchisee, I should say. And it was in the 80s, and from my perspective, in the UK in the 80s, if you had an ounce of gumption and an opportunity, you could make it work. And I was very blessed and did make it work.
That's great.
But that journey lasted about 7 or 8 years, and then we had the recession of '92 that those of old enough to know it. And through a little bit of arrogance and ignorance, I thought I could outperform the recession. I couldn't, and so that put me on a journey. I jumped back on a plane, really recognising that it was much nicer to be poorer in the sunshine than it was to be poorer in the UK, where there's 2 shades of cloud, grey. Yeah, 2 shades of grey cloud, dark or light.
Grey and grey.
So I thought poverty and the sunshine were a much nicer way to go. So
yeah.
I jumped back on a plane and went home, back to Australia. And so that was about 29-30. So that journey then sort of took about a year to recover from the hit. Started my journey back up working and in fact I went back into car yards and managed a car yard for a while over in Sydney, and then had the opportunity to go to Western Australia, to Perth, to see a friend. Arrived there and just fell in love with the place. So that was about 1993, 1994. So that's the quick version of that, sort of,
That's great.
Kid did good and then did dumb. And then started the journey back then, and
At what point did you meet your wife?
so about 2 years in to living in Perth, I met my wife, or what is now my wife, and we hit it off straight away. So I think we were married within about 2 years. By that stage I was about 31, and the conversation, and in regards to the podcast, the conversation was about children at that point. She was 3 years younger, a brilliant midwife, and the conversation was, if we have children, how do we know we're compatible? Because
as parents,
as people, as a male and a female getting to know each other, really in the 30s.
Sure.
So we did something that was highly unusual. I certainly wouldn't recommend it for most people. But we decided to go travelling for a year.
Together?
So, yeah.
That's fantastic.
So we got married. We worked really, really hard for a year. Gathered as much money as we could, and off we set, backpacking basically through about 13 countries in the end. I think through that year we divorced twice, but we survived.
Yeah.
And the theory was really simple. We did it because, anyone can have children, but the responsibility of them is much greater. And as a result of that, I wanted to make sure that we were going to give them the best chance should we be able to have them.
That's fantastic. I mean, traveling for a year with minimal spend, backpacking, all kinds of stressful situations, all kinds of trials. You really learned if you could be a team.
Well, you do in a year what I reckon you probably do in 10 to 15
Yeah.
years in a normal environment.
That's fantastic.
So
That's a great idea.
I don't recommend it for everybody.
I don't know. I mean,
you have your moments, I'll promise you.
Yeah. In courting at my age, still being a single dad, a trip is required. We do a trip.
Yeah.
Because there's so much stress on a trip and so many things can go wrong. I think it's a quick way to see if you're compatible on some levels. Can you work together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it worked for us in the end.
Yeah. So then after a year, you went back to Perth?
Yeah, went back to Perth. We sort of went back to work and started our life and managed to buy a block of land and build a house. And sort of that journey took me back on my entrepreneurial journey. Again, I moved back into a sort of a mortgage world. A car yard dealership, an olive company, a varied group of different businesses which I'd started. And some of those I still have to this day. So
that's great.
28 years later. But so that journey started of I suppose what you do in your 30s is, and as a male, 30 to mid 30s, you start this journey of responsibility whether you like it or not.
Right.
This body clock.
You're an adult now.
Yeah, it's big boy time,
Yeah.
Well, people would say I'm still immature, but I'm just an adolescent at heart.
Yeah, I don't know about you. That's never ending for me, I'm pretty sure. I mean, do you remember, did you ever see the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Yeah.
Where she's stomping her foot and she said, my biological clock is ticking like this. And there's a point with women, they have a few things we don't have. They have a security gland that Dave Ramsey talks about a lot, which I think is pretty funny. But they have a biological clock that they're aware of that, we're men. We think we're going to live forever. In fact, if it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't live very long at all. We'd say, hold my beer, and most of us would be dead.
As long as I'm watching the sport.
Yeah.
What most people don't realise is men have the same thing. They actually do have a clock, and it's a system that it really relies on this period. And for me, and it is very different for everybody, and again, everyone must find out what they're at. But for me, I can honestly say I don't think I was anywhere near responsible enough to take on either a marriage or the thought of children until I was well into my 30s.
Yeah, I would agree.
That was for me.
I think most men haven't found themselves before 25 no matter what.
Yep.
I just think that's true.
Yep.
And but I agree with what you said. And the name of our program is the Fatherhood Code.
Sure.
Because I believe every man has a code within him about fatherhood. There's something in his DNA about being a father. And I joke about how difficult it can be with a stressful environment, and a lot of men don't find themselves in a good business situation, and they're stressed out, and money's a problem, and but there is this thing that's encoded within you to protect and provide, and I think it's built in. I think a lot of men miss it because of external circumstances, or they didn't have a father to teach them how to be a father, which is a lot of the men that we work with were never led by a man in the ways of a father and how to be a father. And so they don't know what they're doing. And many of us go into that, even if we had a great father, in our early 30s, like you said, and we wonder, are we going to be any good at this? Or are we just going to mess this up? And it's a fear. It's a valid fear. I'm going to mess this up. I don't want to mess up my kids.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah, I never wanted to have kids because of that. So when I met my son's mom, she had 3 children.
Right.
And over a 2-hour conversation, when I finally asked her to dinner, she said, well, I thought you don't want to have kids. I said, I don't, but you already have them, so let's go to dinner.
You become part of the deal.
Yeah.
That's fair.
No, it was great. And we had our biological son, which was awesome. So how did you manage running businesses, multiple businesses, as an entrepreneur, while having children? How did you manage the time? How did that work?
You don't. It's just that simple. The difference between being an employee and working for someone and allowing yourself to go home at night put things down at that point and get on with your family is a credit to most men and couples that choose that path.
Yes.
I'm sitting here with you at BA because the people here are entrepreneur or have an entrepreneurial spirit. The issue with that is that's a curse and a blessing.
Agreed.
And my definition of most people here, including myself, if I were to be described, were we can imagine things and we can design, build them and get them there. So we're visionaries. Most entrepreneurs don't understand that. They're building, but if you actually sit them down, what you understand is that most of them are visionaries. They will take a concept, an idea, build that out, and then get bored. And they'll move on to the next one. Or they'll do several simultaneously, which is a very regular occurrence for someone with an entrepreneurial spirit. So very rarely will you even find an entrepreneurial spirit person, and I use those words specifically, and the reason is because in the 80s the word entrepreneur was not a good definition, so I'm taking one that I think is truer. And actually came from Alan Sugar, so I've got to give him credit for that. So the entrepreneurial spirit will often have more than one business going and one idea going at any one time. To the point where my wife will absolutely declare she hated us even going on holiday, because the worst thing that could happen on holiday was I would come up with 2 more business ideas. Yes. So we literally wouldn't go on holiday because she wouldn't want me to come up with any more.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's fantastic.
To answer your question, I can only answer for myself because that's the only experience I've got.
Right.
At that point, we were building a house, we were renovating another house. We were, in my eyes, I'm telling you that I was at the age where I felt my job here was to provide. To provide meant, in my mind, what most provision would be. It was to provide finances, it was to provide a home, it was to provide safety, it was to provide love. All the things that I think hopefully were embedded in me at some point in goodness.
Yes.
So you do your best you can. Now, how we see that and how a lady will see that, or a wife or a mother, are often quite different. And it's just because we are men and we are stuck in this caveman component, me included, of provision. Agreed. My job is to provide now. Right. This is my best opportunity. I've gone through my immaturity period. I've gone through my, messing it up period. Now I'm sort of older and I'm more mature and I have a period of time to try and put the nest egg away.
Time to get it done.
Build the house, be responsible, pick up my big drawers and get on with it. And I was definitely, in hindsight, I look back and that was definitely me. I was, it's time to no longer be as big a loose cannon as I had been as an individual, and now move on to other people and the responsibility of those people. In the meantime, of course, you then have the entrepreneurial spirit guy who's sitting there going, okay, I need to now make a fortune in a very short space of time, which is not what the employee does. The employee is happy to go steady Eddie.
Slow and steady.
Most entrepreneurial spirit people don't.
Correct.
They want to go from hero to zero or zero to hero in nano time. So you put the effort in, and the reality is that you put the effort in. So I found that I was working very long hours, building businesses. In the early days, I made the excuse, to be honest with you, that they were 0 to 2 years of age. As long as I was home for dinner and there at weekends, everything was fine. And whether that was right or not, I can't tell you. I haven't asked my wife, I just did it. After that period, then you realise there's a lot more interaction from a male's perspective. That's not meant as a sexist comment, it's just how I perceived it. And so I got more involved with my boys. And then really the crap hit the fan, because at this point I'm now 40, GFC's on its way, and basically I lose everything. Thanks for that, Carl.
Sorry.
So the result of that meant that we lost the house, we lost everything, and my wife turned around and said, look, you got to stop being who you are, which was a really difficult thing, but you can understand it.
Sure. She wanted stability.
Exactly, and she's entitled to it, by the way. So,
she has that security gland.
Yeah, correct. So at that point in time, unfortunately, I still had a 17 staff. I still had a lot to do. So we had a few adjustments, but to rebuild quickly meant I had to go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
As in back in my own operations, but really work.
Day to day.
I had some stuff to make up.
Yep.
I had a lot of debt.
Yep.
Result of that was, the brief story behind that then became, I really was, for 2 years, I was working probably 20 hours a day, 16, 18
Sure.
hours a day.
I was going to say earlier, entrepreneurs are the only people that will work 80 hours a week to keep from working 40 hours a week.
Yeah, correct. I always made sure I went home for dinner,
Yeah, that's great.
but then I was out again straight after dinner.
And
So-
do you think you were present during dinner?
Oh, definitely not. Absolutely not. But I was physically there, and in my interpretation, that was at least something and better than
It
nothing.
was a big sacrifice because it was probably very difficult to leave the office to go home for dinner.
Well, I'll tell myself that it was a big sacrifice. I'll tell myself it was the right thing to do. But one thing I can tell you in hindsight, it's easy for us to beat ourselves up
Yes,
over this.
yes,
But there was a job to do.
yes.
And the job to do was to try and at least recover to a reasonable level and have some things in play that maybe meant that wasn't going to happen again in the future, so as to please the family unit, secure the family unit, financially secure it again.
Sure.
And that was a primal instinct as well, to recover, get over the shame, build up again, let's get on and do this. And I will tell you right now that during that period, I reckon there was a 2-year period where I barely saw my kids. Tough time. However, here, let me give you the real rainbow part. I had the opportunity in all of this to recognise that people who are self-employed don't have long service leave.
Mm-hmm.
Employees do. I know, I've got them. I
Right.
give them long service leave every
Yeah,
10
now
and 20
for
years.
Americans, that means long vacation time.
Right.
Right.
So long service
Right.
leave is you're with me 10 years, you get 2 months in addition to your existing 4 weeks, etc.,
Right.
fully paid.
Right.
So what that meant for me was that I'd never had that. So the
Right.
result of it was I was in a very privileged position that I'd built my team up, and I took 3 months off.
Wow.
So we bought a little camper van,
Mm-hmm.
tied it up on the back of the car, and off we went. And for me, here's the rainbow. Within 3 to 4 weeks, my kids were back on.
Presence. It was
Back
your
on.
presence, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
They were back in touch with me. I was in touch with them.
It's huge.
And we did that for 3 months in a 12x4 caravan,
That's-
moving halfway around Australia.
Massive blessing.
So this is neither an excuse or an acceptance of what I did, but the result of it was that 3 months gave me back the time I lost, and probably gave them their father back.
Yes. So I have a question. This is a hypothetical, but I ask a lot of people this question.
Sure.
Looking back, you saw what your presence did for your relationship and how it rekindled it and brought it right back to where it was, because your kids are craving that the whole time.
Correct.
Regardless, whether or not you're there, whether it's 2 years absent, they're still craving it, even if they're mad.
Yep.
And this is something I've learned over the years. So if you were to have had the ability to take a half of a day every week, one-on-one, eye-to-eye with your boys, with all of your kids,
Sure.
rather than the 3-month trip, do you think the same thing would have happened? Do you think you would have maintained the connection if you had 1/2 a day a week to do that with them?
I would do it anyway.
Looking back,
I would do it anyway.
right, right.
I would.
And-
I would just simply do it anyway.
Yeah.
They grow up so fast,
Yeah,
you lose it.
it's true.
What changed after I got back was I then became their coach at soccer.
That's great.
You know, and
That's fantastic.
we went to every game.
Yes.
And this went all the way through from the age of 8 to a little bit longer, and then I realised that they weren't listening to my coaching. But I was still at every single game of every single child that I possibly
Right.
could be. And what I learned from that, and probably what I can add to this podcast, is I then got involved with a tech company which I built, and we had a moment then. We went from being in an area, if you like. So at this point it was Western Australia. And for us to go bigger, we could live off what was happening there.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to actually get this to where it needed to go, it meant I had to cover the rest of Australia. So one bit of advice I will give if you want to stay married is I actually approached my wife and gave her the choice. I said, we can either stay with this and it'll last a few years and then we'll probably be beaten out by someone who goes national, or I need to go national with this, and it means me leaving every single week and going over east.
Right.
Now, in Australia, to give you any idea, what that means is a minimum of a 3.5 hour plane trip and up to 6 hours.
It's huge. Yeah, sure.
On a Monday, back on a Friday.
Right.
So huge travel time. What I can say to you is everyone asks me why I did that. Why would I always come back on a Friday? And the answer was to see my kids.
Yeah. So that's that thing that's coded that you know is important, and it takes a lot to build a business like you did. It really is a lot of work. It's not for the faint of heart. Not everyone is even capable of it. But you still had that coded within you that you knew it was important to be with your kids.
Yep.
And man, I give you credit for that, because a lot of men that I meet with don't figure that out for many years until they look back and realize, gosh, I could have come home on Friday.
Yeah.
And they don't see it. So kudos for doing that. I think we tend as men to beat ourselves up. It's just the way we're wired. It also helps drive us.
Sure.
It keeps us, one of the things that we're really good at, if you look at men that go off to war, especially back in, way back, that, they would ride off on their horses and they would be gone a year or two, fighting for what they believe in, fighting for their family just to come back to their family.
Sure.
That would have to tough it out that whole time. And obviously we've evolved from that, but that's what you were doing. You were out fighting demons, fighting the world, building something huge, doing all the battle that needed to be done, making sure you were home on a Friday. And so whatever you look back at, I would tell you after meeting with hundreds of men, as I have, about being a father, is that what you did there, they'll never forget. They'll never forget. I had a really good friend he was just an amazing guy, very slow country, very wise guy, tons of wisdom. And he said to me one time, he said, your kids might remember the house you grew up in if it's the same one you've always had.
Sure.
And maybe they'll remember one or two of your cars, maybe from way back. And they might remember one of their favorite toys. But they will never forget the time you spent eye to eye.
Sure.
And the time you didn't.
Yeah.
It's just, it's in them. And so we have the ability, to pour into them in a way that creates their confidence in the world by what we've poured into our kids. And boys and girls are very different, as you know, and their behaviors are different. So how did you maintain them knowing that you approved of them, that you were proud of them? Is that something that you made sure you said a lot? Or?
Yeah, a really big one. And you mentioned it earlier, and there are a lot of men who grow up that won't get approval. And you and I spoke prior to this, and we were just talking about, and my words to you were, you can choose whether you take that legacy or you can change it. So don't
Break
use
the
it as
cycle.
an excuse.
Right, if you didn't have a good father.
If you had a
Right.
father, well, to say good is such an interesting context. You remember what you remember at that age,
Right.
and it journeys through, and as you get older, maybe you get a chance to look back and say, was it good, was it bad, don't know.
You can have a great father that wasn't present.
Correct.
And that's just the same.
Correct. So the answer is you can make a change. And
Yes.
what I will say is that I spent a lot of time soul searching, looking at the situation, and having had money and then lost the money, you realise that the value of that becomes very transitional.
Yes.
Whereas the value in the family was much greater. I loved coming back for their sports. I would come back on that weekend to go and be with them and be present at their sports, possibly over present, as they would probably tell you. All too often.
Yeah, my son would say the same, yes.
But I loved it, and I
Yeah.
loved cheering them on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I got the privilege of doing, and I'm sure there's lots that I have done wrong. If you had my children on here, I'm pretty sure that they would tell you a few things that they weren't happy about how I approached. But what I will say is that I had the choice, and I made the choice to encourage my children and tell them that I'm proud of them, no matter what they do, no matter who they are, but to actually continually remind them that I am proud of them and that they do have a home. And currently, my children are talking to me.
Yes. And they're how old now?
23, and 20.
Okay, so
And let me tell you, that's
big.
Huge. For me.
It's really big because they could be out doing their thing at this point, you know, and it's the old Cat in the Cradle song, right? You know, they're choosing now to be home on Friday by choosing to be with you.
Yeah.
So your choice to be home on Friday led to them choosing to be with you today.
And the other thing I'll encourage, because I did it, was it's really easy to find excuses why and how not to find time one-on-one when you've got more than one. But it is essential to find time to do one-on-one with what they want to do. I still do it to this day.
Yep, and that's the key that a lot of fathers don't know, what they want to do.
Yeah.
If you always love to go to car shows and you say, well, I bring them every Sunday to a car show, yeah, but what do they want to do?
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend of mine, and we were talking, and we had met each other, and we were just getting to know each other on a Zoom. And he said, you know, what do you like to do with your son? I said, oh, we love to fish. You know, we fish. And he said, you know, my son's been asking me to fish a lot, but we have these lakes here, and they're stocked, and it's just kind of like fishing in a barrel, so we don't go. And I said, wait a minute. He's not asking you to fish. He's asking you to spend time with him.
Yep.
So go on Amazon, find some gear, go on YouTube, learn how to fish where you are, and take that boy fishing. And recently he did.
Excellent.
And he talked about it on a social media post, and he said, I didn't see what I didn't see.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a cry for close time together. It was a time for bonding. My son was begging me for it. I just thought he wanted to go fishing. Yeah. And I think what you said is really huge. I used to listen to my son talk about Roblox, this video game. I'm not a gamer. No. But he has this uncanny memory where he could remember a whole session for an hour and a half. And he would tell me about it. And it would take an hour and a half. And it was horrible. It was the worst thing I ever to listen to. But I made sure to focus. I learned about the game so I could ask good questions.
Sure.
And I treated it as if it was something I loved to do too. And he remembers that, 18. He said, and then in basketball, same thing. He could remember the entire game, play by play, and he wanted to talk about it. And I would listen. And to this day, I make it a point, whatever he's involved in, I'm involved in. Because, and in turn, some of the things I like to do, he likes to do. Some he doesn't. And that's okay. But that is so key, what you said, and knowing to focus on what they want to do, because that's quality time.
Now this comes with a cursor, and the cursor is really simple. So my youngest, he and I try and head out spasmodically. He's busy, he's got 2 or 3 jobs, he's got his uni, but we try and go and do 9 holes of 3-par golf. And I was out with him last month, and I said, oh look, do you want to go out and play golf? And he went, yeah, okay, it's fine. So off we went. At the end of the golf, he was having a bit of a tanty about how bad he was. And I said, oh, I thought you liked golf. He said, no, I hate golf. I said, well, why are we here? And he said, because I want to hang with you.
Yeah. And did you respond with, what do you want to do?
I did, and he said, yeah, I love rock climbing. I said, good, you're on your own.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
I'm 60 years old and I'm not rock climbing,
I'm not falling off of a cliff.
But hey, I'm really keen on you going, so that's fine. That's a true story.
That's so funny.
Let's also make this out that I am not the best father of the year, and I'll never win the best father of the year award. But what I can encourage is anyone who's there is find time for them. They're never lost. You know, I've got 3 boys. One of them, we've had some real challenges. I've had some real challenges with him. Everyone will tell you it's because I was probably him at his age. And so that clash comes about because of it.
How that works.
But continue. You have to learn to adapt. I've had to learn to adapt, and it wasn't easy. You know, at our age and as fathers, we want to have it our way, because it's our way, because we're the father. And again, if you go back to what we grew up with? Are we demonstrating the DNA of our parents or our father again here? And you and I spoke about this briefly, and I said that I felt that during my journey, obviously I have a vast makeup of the DNA of my father. Yeah. But you have choices again of what you can change of that, and then you have to work at that.
That's right.
So, without question, I'm not Father of the Year.
There is no such thing.
But I will encourage guys to say, find time and be present when you are with them, and try and do less of what I do, which is probably don't answer the phone as if it's an inconvenience. And I probably do that way too often when they call me, and I'm trying really hard to, when they phone me, to respond in the correct, nurturing nature of
That's great.
actually being present. And that's my current journey with my 23-year-olds and my 20-year-old. And I, truly, all the business deals, all the money, I've got to tell you now, it's nothing compared with that.
So, or he knows I'm at work. If he's calling, it must be important. And we've developed those, things. But he knows that he has access to me before anyone else in the world.
Right.
And that has developed a trust that has gone for miles and miles. Man, thank you so much for sharing your story. What a blessing to meet you, to spend time with you. I'm here at the BA event, second quarter in Dallas, Texas. We have had already a great day. It's only day 2. And this has been incredible. And the time that we just spent together was one of the most valuable moments I've had here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Have a blessed day.
You too.